Welcome, everybody. I can see that people are entering into the Zoom room and to join us for this webinar on the impact of the amphetamine Captagon on Jordan, a qualitative perspective of patients and frontline workers. My name is Dr. Carol Palmer. I'm the CBRL Director in Amman, Jordan, and it's my delight to have with us today Professor Mayada Wazefi, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Dr. Chrissy Steenkamp to present the lecture today. CBRL is, I'm honored that we have the possibility to provide a platform to present the results of Chrissy and Mayada's work today. I had the pleasure of being invited to a workshop last May on the impact of the amphetamine Captagon on Jordan. And one of the pleasures of my role is to attend such very, very interesting events, such as the workshop that I attended. And I was just looking back at my notes. I took copious notes, so I was clearly very, very engaged, and I very much look forward to what we are going to hear today, which is a summary of their work, past and ongoing. I've put in the webinar chat the link to the CBRL website. I think many of you who signed up and are joining us today will know about us, but just a reminder about CBRL and where you can go to find out about our activities, who we are, what we do, and to encourage you, if you're not already, to join our mailing list and possibly even consider being a member. So Professor Mayada Wazefi is going to speak first. She is Professor of Pharmacy Practice at the School of Pharmacy at the University of Jordan, with nearly 20 years of experience in the area of prescription and OTC drug abuse and misuse, and mainly in the enforcement of the role of the pharmacist in the prevention, identification, and management of drug abuse and misuse. She will speak first, and to be followed by Dr. Chrissy Steenkamp, who is a senior lecturer in social and political change at Oxford Brookes University in the UK, where she teaches and carries out research in peace and conflict studies with a specific interest in conflict in the Middle East. And it's a delight really to present this project, these speakers, because it's an excellent example of how more scientific, if you like, and social science research can come together to understand particularly contemporary issues such as the impact of the amphetamine Captagon. So if Mayada, you would like to share screens, I can just give some house notes, which is our speakers will speak for maybe up to 40 minutes all together, and then there will be the chance to ask questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A. There is also the facility, if you would like because I know that we can see you as the host and the panelists, we can see you, but you can't see each other so much. So if you would like to be identified and say hello and say you're here, You can also put a comment and introduce yourself in the chat too. So are we ready? And afterwards, after the 40 minutes, there will be opportunity to ask questions. So please, please gather your thoughts, gather your questions, and I will be chairing the session afterwards. And we have up to an hour and a quarter in total, so about another hour before we will close up and just say some final remarks. So thank you very much for being with us today, and if I can hand over to Professor Mayada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol, for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for making the time to join us today. It's such a pleasure for me to be part of the CBRL event and talk about our joint research with Oxford Brookes University. In fact, at the beginning, I would like to thank the GCRF. This research was funded by Global Research Challenges Research Fund in the UK in a grant to Oxford Brookes University to collaborate with the University of Jordan to work on Captagon. I would also like to thank our star research assistant, Yara Al-Khatib, who is now among the audience. In order not to take a lot of your time, I will share my screen. And here you go. In the coming 20 minutes, I will talk about my part of the joint research, which, as Carol said, it's a multi-national and multidisciplinary. I come from a pharmacy background, and my colleague, Dr. Steenkamp, she comes from a political social sciences background. So we are interested in Captagon from two perspectives. I would like to start my talk by this quote from one of our patients, from the patients whom I interviewed. He said, "My youngest son was talking to me and I couldn't tolerate him, so I kicked him. When I became conscious, I saw his blood, and that was the moment I knew it was enough. When I saw how things escalated, I called mom and told her I needed help. If the situation goes on any longer, I might end up committing a crime." I thought that this quote summarizes the importance of why our research came in place and why Captagon is such a big problem from health, humanitarian, political, legal, and social point of view. So in the coming 20 minutes, I will touch base on the most important information about the nature of Captagon, what Captagon is, chemistry, synthesis, pharmacology, its legislation in Jordan, why people take Captagon, the SOAT effects and the withdrawal symptoms, and will summarize briefly the findings of my part of the research. So, starting with the Captagon. What is Captagon? Captagon is an amphetamine-type stimulant. Amphetamine-type stimulants are a group of drugs that comprise central nervous system stimulants. They include amphetamine and methamphetamine. Both of them together are called amphetamines. They also include prescribed or pharmaceutical products containing methylphenidate, dexamphetamine, phentermine, and other pharmaceutical products used for the treatment of fatigue, narcolepsy, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. They also involve ecstasy, the MDMA, other stimulants like ephedrine, pseudoephedrine that you can find in OTC products for cold and flu. You don't find ephedrine anymore, but you find pseudoephedrine. And finally, our phenethylline or Captagon, the topic of this talk. Talking of amphetamine-type stimulants are now, according to the UNODC World Drug Report in 2022, the amphetamine-type stimulants, they are the second most commonly used substances worldwide. After hashish. And as you can see, the methamphetamine has increased in the past, changed from the previous year, increased by 16%. The total amphetamines by 15%. The amphetamine itself as an ingredient reduced by 5%. And what I am going to talk about, the Captagon, which lies here, with other amphetamine type stimulants increased by 53%. According to the UNODC, it is estimated that 0.7% of the global population aged between 15 and 64 years old, they used methamphetamines in the past year, and 20 million they used ecstasy in the past year. Of course, the type and the form of amphetamines used vary considerably among regions and subregions. In North America, for example, you can see that North America is the top, and the prevalence of use in the past year was 3.9%. Most of which were pharmaceutical products, where Oceania, for example, which is Australia and New Zealand, the use of crystal meth predominates. Since we are in the Middle East, we care about, our region where Captagon predominates. So again, what is Captagon? Captagon is phenethylline, and when I want to talk about the prevalence of use compared to other regions of the world, I mentioned 3.9% in North America in total of amphetamines. Regarding Captagon, according to the recent study conducted by medical students at the University of Jordan in 2021, only on university students, the most widely used stimulant was Captagon, speaking of all the amphetamine type stimulants. And this study was conducted on 8,739 university students and high school students in Jordan. So with a prevalence of 2.6% of using Captagon. In another study that we conducted in collaboration with Al Yarmouk University, between the years of 2014 2018, the confiscations of the seizures of Captagon summed up to 250 million in the 4 years between 2014 and 2018, all of which indicated the burden that Captagon has on society in Jordan. And we all read the news recently in December 2022 about the seizure of 6 million tablets smuggled in date paste. That that was on BBC and all other news. So again, what is Captagon? Captagon, the name Captagon is the old brand name and the new street name for a psychoactive drug. In the 60s, it was produced by a German company called Digosa Pharma Gruppe, in which tablets that contained 50 milligrams of phenethylline used to treat ADHD, narcolepsy, fatigue, and other conditions. It was first non-prescription, in Germany and under different brand names, and then it was regulated to become prescription only. After which, the liability for abuse was discovered. So different governments in Europe and the US declared it as controlled substance in 1981. So it was withdrawn and the manufacturing ceased. As for Jordan, in 1988, Captagon as a substance, as a drug, was scheduled. And now it is placed in Schedule 6, which contains stimulants. Captagon is a prodrug that has a phenethylline as active ingredient. After ingestion, it is metabolized in the liver to the two active ingredients, amphetamine and theophylline, both of which are CNS stimulants. However, the main addictive substance of Captagon is the amphetamine. Theophylline is a bronchodilator, and also it's a mild CNS stimulant. So both of them, they contribute to the CNS stimulant effect of Captagon. However, on the other hand, the tablet that is sold on the illegal marketplace in our sub-region, especially the one that, that has the Captagon logo, this is the original Captagon logo, that has the 2C or the half moons, opposite, not necessarily contains the active ingredient that I talked about, the phenethylline. According to research, different research studies that was conducted in Jordan, and I would like to, due to the time, just to mention this one, that was conducted by the Drug Control Department of the Public Security Directorate in 2005. They analyzed samples from 124 batches seized, out of which none contained the active ingredient phenethylline. They contained different active ingredients, cheap drugs, chlorphenamine, procaine, trimethoprim, which is an antibiotic, chloroquine, quinine, anti-malarial, caffeine, metronidazole, which is an antifungal, and none of them contained the active ingredient. Those are the street names of Captagon in Jordan: Kabet, Abu Hilalain, which means the two crescents, Kapti. And I would also like to note, and this is something that I will mention again in the findings of our qualitative research, is that different logos on different tablets available on the street indicates the different potency and the active ingredients, and thus it also determines the price of the tablet, and not necessarily that all the tablets contain phenethylline. Some of them, according to the forensic lab, it turned out to contain MDMA, which is ecstasy, but it is sold as Captagon on the street. Captagon mainly is administered orally. However, other methods of administration were also reported in the literature, like smoking, snorting, IV, subcutaneous, and intraperitoneal. Speaking of the sought effects of Captagon, Captagon has short-term and long-term effects. Why do people take Captagon? Well, the short-term effects are to provide mental and psychomotor performance, to improve the mental and psychomotor performance, to provide feeling of well-being, to stimulate physical performance. Mainly, it is promoted among university students and drivers of long distances, like lorries, trucks, Jordan, Turkey, Jordan, Germany, and to students especially during the exam period. Captagon is reported to stimulate the CNS, to elevate the heart rate, body temperature, respiration, and to elevate body temperature moderately, and also to suppress appetite. That's why it is, among other amphetamines, promoted also to lose weight. On the long run, it will cause, however, extreme depression, lethargy, insomnia, and this is one reason why you can rarely find someone abusing or using Captagon, but not using other sedative hypnotics, for example, to get them to sleep. Heart failure, MI, blurred vision, irritability, and other sorts of problems. Quickly, in the remaining time, I would like to touch base on the most important findings of my part of the study, which involved the experiences of users and therapists in Jordan regarding Captagon. Data saturation, we reached data saturation after interviewing 27 participants, 20 users, and 7 therapists, most of which were male, except 5, 1 user and 4 therapists. The interviews lasted between 10 and 45 minutes, and the median age was 27. The majority, as I mentioned earlier, they combined Captagon with hashish, alcohol, or heroin. Just to give you an idea of the occupation of the participants in our study, the users mainly, you can find medical students, university students, tour guide, watch repairs, a medical doctor, sailor, butcher, so all sorts of occupations and different education levels, high school, bachelor, law school, business management. Okay. Our data analysis elicited 6 main themes. Of course, due to the time, I'm not going to go through the sub-themes, but I'm going to touch base on the most important themes that were elicited by both users and therapists during the interviews. Definition of Captagon, involving the meaning of Captagon to the participants, effects, patterns of use and withdrawal, under which came also the potency, the price, the different types on the street, motivations to the use of Captagon, and also motivations to the treatment of of Captagon addiction, the main sources and the ease of accessibility, and finally, the impact of COVID-19 on their use and also the accessibility of treatment. First theme, as I said, the definition of Captagon. All therapists and the majority of users, they identified or they knew that Captagon was a CNS stimulant. And despite the pharmaceutical shape, because this is actually where promotion of Captagon comes from, mainly, the pharmaceutical shape of the tablet shape makes people think that they are taking a medicine. But during our research, all the participants, they knew that it is not a pharmaceutical preparation, as you can see in this quote. Okay, but Captagon isn't a medication. I don't know, it's a stimulant, but you don't think it's a medication? I asked him, he said no. Regarding the effects, patterns of use and withdrawal symptoms, the study explored the different effects Captagon had on the participants based on their own experiences and motives of use. The main effect Captagon had was its stimulant effect, whether it's mental or physical, which made users opt for it as a mean to improving performance in work or studying. As you can see here, when I am on Captagon, I am fully active. I would finish 5 days worth of work in a single day. I could stay up for 2 to 3 days. Then I asked him, does it make you study better? He said, at the beginning, yes. Well, as we said, that pharmacologically, it will cause tolerance. So with time, they will lose all the positive short effect, and they will no longer feel the mental and physical stimulation. Nevertheless, they will start feeling the long-term side effects. Also under the effect and the patterns of use comes very important determinant for the effect, which is the type and the source of pills. Almost all participants stated that the more expensive types are proven to be of higher purity and subsequently offer a greater extent and duration of stimulation. The range of price, or the price range between 1 and 10 JDs. And some of them mentioned that they would take 10 or 20 of the cheap or the local, they call it the local type with the 2 crescents, and they won't feel anything. Some of them called it choke, tabashir, choke, which is the, you know, to indicate the useless effect. You have the Lexus, as I show you recently in the picture. You have the Lexus. This is the purest type. As the user, I can take 1 pill and it would stay effective for 3 days. Okay, then I asked him, what about the type with the horse's head? He said, this is the very good type. It comes from Israel. Not the one with the Star of David, I asked him. The one of Star of David is also pretty good. Okay, so the ones with the Star of David and the horse's head are both from Israel. He said, yes. 5 pills from the local type with the 2 crescents are equivalent to 1 pill of the Israeli ones. Social consequences also comes under the effect. At the beginning, all of them, they mentioned that they would become more sociable. It will remove the inhibitions, but with time, they will feel isolated. Isolated from their family, friends. It will cause family problems, divorce, violence. I'm not going to read all the quotes, but for example, this one, I was very energized and I was able to get along with people better at the beginning. It gives you courage as well. You can enter the manager's office and talk to him without any sort of barriers between you. You don't feel scared of him, and I got used to it. Regarding the side effects, the most commonly reported side effect was paranoia, which will lead eventually to criminal behavior and distrust of family and friends and low self-esteem. I became extra suspicious. I started thinking that people were conspiring against me. When people were around me, I always had a feeling that they would do something. These spells strip you trust away towards everyone. Captagon contributes to crimes associated with aggression. It's highly associated with crime related to violence. Very important side effect that I would like to mention is the myth mouth. The myth mouth characteristic is the severe tooth decay and fall of teeth and gum erosion. In one study that was funded by the National Institute of Drug Abuse on 571 meth users, 96% of them had cavities, 58% had untreated tooth decay, and 31% had 6 or more missing teeth. And this particular patient was telling me about how he could pull out his tooth, wisdom tooth, with his hand easily. Different users, they use different quantities, and many of them, they used 20 pills daily. They started with a quarter pill, and they started to raise or they increase the amount gradually because of tolerance. All of them reported that they had tolerance, and they mixed the drug, the Captagon, with other drugs, either to boost the effect or to get them to sleep. As you can see here, if I want to go to work, I would use Captagon, not marijuana. At night, when I get back from work, I would smoke marijuana. Captagon gave me energy. It made me active and highly focused. Captagon is for doing duties. Weed is for when you are at home doing nothing. The withdrawal symptoms, usually in pharmacology, withdrawal symptoms of substances are the opposite of the clinical effects. So with Captagon, they reported laziness, feeling sleepy, tired, irritability, depression, head and body aches, and inability to interact with people. The motivations for Captagon use, most of them, they used Captagon to help them work and earn money or to study better. We had the one only female user, participant in our study, using Captagon for a health or for health reason, to get her over her back pain, because she couldn't get the pregabalin anymore because it was scheduled in Jordan since 2017. So some of her friends recommended Captagon. Main sources were drug dealers, friends, and acquaintances. All participants reported that it was easy to get Captagon. None of them reported any problems to get Captagon, even during COVID, as you would see. And especially the cheap price was particularly mentioned as one of the motives or reasons to use Captagon. I used to take it from people, acquaintances. I live in a village that's filled with drug dealers. It wasn't a hard task for me to find my fix. It was cheap. They used to get the 200 pills for 80 JDs. They tell the guy that it's 80 or 100 for the 200 pills. Regarding the treatment, I'm not going to go deep into detail, but the main motivation to treatment was family and friends, and to get rid of the long-term side effects. More than half of our participants admitted themselves voluntarily. And as you know, that the Jordanian law will exempt you from prosecution if you go to treatment voluntarily, which encourages people to go and seek treatment. However, the rest, they were brought willingly or compulsorily. Finally, the impact of COVID-19, some of our participants surprisingly reported the easy access during lockdown. They said that their Captagon was delivered by those who had permit or stopped during some of them tried to stop during the pandemic. Only one participant reported that he succeeded to stop using drug during the pandemic. Therapists, they reported shift during the pandemic from Captagon to other substances like this quote, "A shift to Joker has been noted between June and August." He meant 2020, due to the reduced manufacturing and quantities. Getting one's hand on Captagon has become harder in general. That's it for me, and I will leave it to my colleague, Dr. Steenkamp, to talk to you about the other part of our research and findings. Thank you very much for listening.
Carol, do you just want me to go into sharing my
Yes, if you
slides?
just go, yes, if you just go straight on, if you can share your
Sure, I think it's that one. Can you see it?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect, great. Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you to Carol for the invitation to come and present our work here at the CBRL. And it's lovely to catch up with Carol again and to see everyone. Okay, so I'll get started. Where Mayada focused in her part of the project on the experiences of Captagon users and the treatment of this use. In my part of the project, I focused on the trafficking part. So where does the Captagon come from? How does it get into Jordan? And what is Jordan doing about it? So in my part of the project, I focused on interviews with policymakers in, for example, the Public Security Directorate, the Anti-Narcotics Department in particular, and UN agencies and so on in Jordan, who all have a stake or an interest in this issue. So where does the Captagon come from? Well, I think it's very clear that the Captagon that we find in Jordan originates from Syria, mostly. And as I think Mayada has mentioned as well, Captagon obviously has a long history. And we see it was really sort of from 2013 that it became very clear that in the Middle East, and certainly since then in the world, Syria has become a major producer, if not the major producer of Captagon by now. And especially since 2018, once the Syrian regime, with the help of Russian support and international allies, managed to regain control in southern Syria, we have seen a dramatic increase in Captagon production in the south of Syria, and with that, an increase in trafficking into Jordan, which of course shares a border there. So I guess we can ask a question, well, how has this happened that production of Captagon moved from initially the Eastern Europe and the Balkans, then to Lebanon, and then from there to Syria? And I think there's a few main explanations for that. One of them is that Syria has always had a very good pharmaceutical industry, which means that the factories were there, the technological knowledge was amongst the population, the road networks, transport networks, and so on were already pre-existing before the war even broke out. There has also been a very long history of regime involvement in smuggling through Syrian territory. So prior to the war, we have seen involvement of the Syrian government in trafficking illegal shipments from Lebanon, for example, through Syrian territory to markets in the Arabian Peninsula. So there's a long history of regime involvement in smuggling in Syria. Of course, with the outbreak of war in 2011, 2012, we also see a shift away from law enforcement, or there's less of an interest in dealing with or responding to drug trafficking because they have other fights to fight, so to speak. So that certainly creates, as we see in war zones worldwide, once war breaks out, it creates certain opportunities and lowers the sort of the costs of trafficking and producing drugs. Also, of course, with war comes the need for armed groups to raise funds, to make money, to buy weapons, to pay combatants, etc. And then, so that's pretty much how production really started. Captagon production started in the war with some of the armed groups turning to Captagon production to start on trafficking, to make money, to fight their armed struggle. And then Syria's geographical location makes it obviously very well positioned to engage and to participate in this trade. It shares land borders with several countries. It has a coastline. It has airports, but also it is not far from the main consumer countries in the Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula in particular. So those are sort of the main reasons we've identified of why Syria became a main Captagon producer in the first place. Of course, since then, since 2013, we have seen significant developments, which I'll talk about later. Right, just quickly about the different groups involved in trafficking, and this does sort of change periodically and so on, but sort of at the moment or over the last 2 years, we have seen the following groups primarily involved. So you can see there on the picture I have there, the map showing the movement of Captagon from Syria into across the southern border into Jordan. So, of course, in southern Syria, you've got various militia groups, armed military groups, some of them linked to Lebanon, some of them linked to the Syrian government and Iran. And they cooperate very closely with smuggling and organized crime groups who sort of operate across that Syrian-Jordanian border. So on that border in particular, you also have tribal groups there who have kinship links on both sides of the border and a very long tradition of trade, formally and informally, across that border. And then, of course, since socioeconomic conditions have really deteriorated in that area, northern Jordan, the north of Jordan and southern Syria, due to border closures, due to the war and other reasons, that has sort of created additional reasons or opportunities to become for the local populations to become involved in this trade and trafficking. And then inside Jordan, we've seen in the last few months in newspaper reports reporting a real sort of crackdown within Jordan on local dealers, so people selling Captagon to the local Jordanian market. I think this example of a newspaper report from the Jordan Times there shows that I think, if I remember the story correctly, a person was in a sting operation. He tried to sell 2 tablets of Captagon to an undercover policeman, and he was obviously then caught. And he got 3 years in prison and more than 3,000 JD fine for trying to sell 2 tablets. So I think that clearly there are groups inside Jordan, there are leaders inside Jordan. The Jordanian authorities are obviously now focusing on making that unattractive as well. And then here, as you see from a quote there from our research, it was very clear that the authorities do think that a lot of the Captagon that circulates within and gets sold within Jordan come from sort of leakage from local storage facilities where the shipments are stored before they move on in their journey to other countries. Okay, so what we were really interested in was to see how Jordan responds to Captagon trafficking. And from our interviews, it became clear that there were sort of 3 principles that guided Jordan's response to Captagon trafficking. Firstly, it was focusing on the border and on controlling the border and preventing the shipments from reaching Jordan in the first place. And as I said before, that 360 odd kilometer land border, which they share with Syria, is sort of the main entry point for Captagon into Jordan. This border control has become increasingly violent and has really turned into a conflict since 2022, so since last year, when the Jordanian authorities announced that they are going to use force to respond to smuggling operations. So we have seen that several millions of Captagon tablets confiscated last year. In fact, that figure is actually higher now. As Mayara said in her talk, 6 million were confiscated the other day or a month ago or so, just on the Iraqi border as well. Several smugglers have been killed, some soldiers as well. We can see at least 160 smuggling groups are reportedly active on the Syrian-Jordanian border. And they are increasingly sophisticated in the methods that they use. They sort of use drones to drop shipments of Captagon across the border and so on. The second focal point or focus in the Jordanian response to Captagon trafficking was clearly to destroy local manufacturing as and when they find it. There was a well-publicized laboratory found in 2018, which was then dismantled by the army and the police. So far, no one has told us about anything else that has been found in terms of local production. So who knows? But that is the sort of the big one we know of in 2018. And then thirdly, obviously treating the users of Captagon, and Mayara has talked about that in length, so I won't spend time on that. Right, so from our interviews, and I've got a few quotes there illustrating some complicating factors in Jordan's response to Captagon trafficking. So what are the problems that they encounter? Well, firstly, the fact that as long as there is political instability in Syria, then they realize in Jordan that really they are going to have to continue to deal with Captagon coming into Jordan. Because the instability creates conditions for manufacturing and for trafficking. So as long as it is, like one respondent said, as long as it's a mess over there, then they will have to deal with the fallout of that mess. Secondly, and this interview we did there was, I think, in 2017, so it was some time ago, right at the start of the project. And then there was real optimism. I think within the anti-narcotics department, saying, well, as soon as this conflict just ends in Syria and we have a government who is able and willing to cooperate with us and to actually do something about the Captagon trade, then we will have a reliable cooperative partner that we can work with, and we can have effective cross-border sort of cooperation. As we know now, that has never really happened. So even though there might be some degree of political stability in Syria, or certainly better than it was in 2017, we know now from reports that the Syrian government and the Syrian regime is increasingly itself involved in the manufacturing and the trafficking of this narcotic. So the hopes in Amman of having a willing cooperating partner in Damascus, I think seem a far way off. And then I think thirdly, another problem that Jordan is facing in its response is the fact that the Captagon smuggling is clearly not the only smuggling economy across that border. It is part of a wider economy of smuggling of weapons, human trafficking, people moving across that border for various reasons. So I think it has to be addressed in that sort of holistic perspective as well, and that makes it difficult. It's not just about the drugs. And then lastly, I think just a few words about future challenges for Jordan. I think the extent to which Captagon manufacturing in Jordan will become established, that remains to be seen, but that is a real danger. And that could introduce all kinds of different dynamics. And of course, with that, you will see increasing levels of domestic consumption, which we are already seeing in Jordan. And I think that is part of the authorities' decision to crack down on local dealers is in response to that. And of course, that has public health repercussions, as Mayada has outlined. And then lastly, I think the continued presence of various internationally linked militant groups in southern Syria and their very heavy involvement in the Captagon production and trafficking trade is a real concern, I think, for the region, but also certainly for Jordan as well. Whether that could lead to further regional instability or certainly prevent a resolution to any instability. And I think that's it. Thank you very much, Carol.
Thank you very much to you both for your presentations, which are very comprehensive, and I remember very well from the workshop. And also I note that that you have a few updates as well, because one of my I remember that a lot was done, a lot of the study was done during COVID, and all that you did to continue this excellent work. And one of my questions, if I'm going to take chair's privilege and start to say what has happened now, what has happened in that year since. I think you're suggesting it, but is it more of a problem, less of a problem? How do the authorities view it since the pandemic finished? I don't know who would like to answer that question.
I can say something quickly about the trafficking bit. I think it is. I think it is certainly a worry that we see, especially in southern Syria, this increased involvement of various groups who all have political agendas and certain capacities, who are involved in the trafficking and the production of Captagon. And that has certainly increased. I mean, it is the sort of estimates are that it has become Syria's main export to a large degree over the last year or two. So I think that is certainly a new development. That is certainly in terms sort of politically and in terms of sort of international security, that is a big concern. I don't know if Mayada wants to say anything about domestic consumption levels.
Domestic consumption levels in Jordan, if I want to report the top 3 substances in Jordan, Captagon is definitely the first or the second. It comes, crystal meth currently, Captagon and hashish are the top 3. And this is different from surrounding countries, because I know friends working in a similar area in neighboring countries, and I know that heroin, for example, is one of the top substances there. But in Jordan, luckily, injecting heroin is not on top of our lists. But Captagon, unfortunately, is, and crystal meth currently, even among females.
Yes, thank you. We do have some questions that are coming in the question and answer, and I'm also noting that Professor Mayada is answering is answering some of them too. But to share some of those, the first question was about the so-called Israeli-made tablets. And the chemical composition of those, and how commonplace it is to find inside Jordan. And if you can just share, Mayada, your answers with the group, just so that we can clarify this. Yeah.
Well, the answer is, I did not find any study coming from the forensic lab apart from the one that I presented with you that dates back to 2005. But I phoned friends at the forensic lab to ask them about, preliminary results that they found, and they reported that the horse shape and the star tablets, they did not contain phenethylline, they contained MDMA, which is ecstasy. And probably this is the reason why they have the reputation among users, you know, the ones with the star and the horse, they have the reputation of being the most powerful and probably the most expensive as well, because they don't contain caffeine and cocaine and quinine like the rest. Regarding the second part of the question, how commonplace is it to find inside Jordan? Well, the quick answer is I don't know, since the users, they reported that they got these powerful tablets from friends, you know, coming and going, traveling, you know, across the border. So that was the quote from the user, but not necessarily that it has only one source. Probably it has different sources.
Yeah. Is it partly marketing that people think of a particular source as being better, but it's not actually where it's made, but it's part of marketing that people will, as we saw, some of the symbols were like prestige cars and all of these things. So is it really from Israel, or is it marketing or multiple sources?
It is different sources. Probably the quote that I showed, you know, on my slide was talking about particular source, but it is the common practice among users to know the potency of the tablets by color and by, you know, different other experiments that they conduct on the tablet to show that this is good quality or not. It's their own, you know, stuff that they know. They can use light or any other, you know, material to know or to learn about the potency. In addition to the logo that has, you know, we know that, you know, dealers, they mark or they brand their manufacturing, you know, either powder or hashish or whatever, by certain logo to show the quality. So it's among, you know, it's like a common culture among users to know that, for example, the one with 2 crescents is cheap and it's poor stuff, whereas the one with a star or with a horse head is better, it's good, it's more expensive.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to the chat. We've got another question in the Q&A also from the same attendee, but just in the chat, we've got, thank you for such an insightful study, but could there be a relation between social status and this drug use? And part 2, which regions in Jordan is Captagon common? So about social status and where in the country is it most commonly used? Good questions. Who would like to answer this?
Yeah, well, according to the same study that was conducted by medical students from University of Jordan on the 8,700, you know, students that I was referring to, which hasn't been published yet, but the manuscript has been written. In the data, most of the users in this particular study, they came from the south, but not necessarily, because the users that I meet in the treatment centers, they come from different parts of Jordan. But according to this study, the quantitative one that was conducted on students, most of them come from the south.
Okay, and
sorry,
status? Yes, please carry on.
No, sorry, just I think Mayada, I don't think we got the impression in our research that it is geographically focused.
In our study, no. In our study, in our qualitative study, Chrissy, no. But in the other study, you know, the quantitative one, the survey, you know, and while you are answering, I can go back to the figure they have or the table. But I'm pretty sure that most of the answers, but not necessarily, this indicates that most of the users, they come from the south, but that was quantitatively. But our study, it's not representative because it is qualitative. And they come from all parts.
Okay. And social status, is there a difference in, I mean, you said it's students and can be quite professional people. I think you said not so many women, but is there any relationship between social status and this particular drug use that you can identify?
From my experience, there is no link between the social status and Captagon, bearing in mind that it's a very cheap substance, you know. So, you know, anybody can buy it. So it's not linked to certain socio-economic status, for example.
If I can just add to that, when we talk about user groups and social or social characteristics, we did, I mean, a weakness in our study, if we have to be honest, is that we didn't manage to get many female users. And I think just because they are underrepresented in treatment facilities and treatment programs. Anyway, so we have very little idea really of whether there's a gender dynamic at play in terms of the use of Captagon. But also the interviews that we did have with women were really with female users who were receiving treatment, were very insightful in their experience of drug use and the reasons for why they use it and the dynamics surrounding that and the reasons why they look for treatment seem to be, just from these few interviews that we have, very different from that of men. So I think and this is something we would want to address in our future work, is to look more at the female experience, the sort of gendered nature of drug addiction and treatment, and especially with Captagon.
Okay. Clearly, the Jordanian authorities are sort of clamping down on it, but do you have any sense of how socially acceptable it is? If it's among the people that you interviewed, did they just see it as a useful tool and it was fine to help them study and do well in their exams? Or do you have any sense of sort of different attitudes by users and authorities?
I think Mayada, you will probably know more since you live in Jordan. Yeah.
Carol, your voice was cut for a while. Can you please repeat the question?
I'm just, I mean, how obviously the way it's the authorities in Jordan are coming down quite hard, obviously, on it, and as you said, it's scheduled, but it's, as you've shown, very commonly available. What's the sort of attitude among the people you interviewed about its acceptability? Is it just, you know, something that's acceptable, helps you to do well in an exam, or to get through a sort of difficult period, or is it looked down upon, say, within the family, this sort of thing? Do you have a sense of how it's viewed socially? I mean, I'm sure there's going to be variation, but do you have a sense of, is it just something handy to use if you need to revise for an exam or something like that?
From what I see, it is still perceived as a substance of abuse. You know, I know that, you know, from the study that we conducted, you know, the quantitative one, I know that some students, they use Captagon. I think the percentage that we had, as I showed you, was 5.2% in the past month among high school and university students all over Jordan. So I know that some of them use it, but it's still since you asked me about the attitude and how they perceive it, it is still perceived as a substance of abuse. And even among the users that I meet at the addiction treatment centers, stigma is available. Well, stigma is a double-edged sword. I will talk about stigma. It's a double-edged sword. It's good for them to come and seek treatment because it is not okay to use drugs, to study or for any other sorts of thing. But stigma at the same time is a barrier for some people to go and seek treatment. If you may allow me, also speaking of stigma, since Chrissy mentioned, the small number of females in the treatment, do we perceive this now? The number of females in treatment is increasing. Do we perceive this as positive or negative? We can look at it either way because it's good to have more females in treatment. This means that awareness is increasing regarding treatment. And it's more accepted, for females with problems to go and seek treatment. At the same time, it's negative because does that mean that we have more female users? It depends, on the perspective.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yes, I mean, I'm going to go back to some questions. Obviously, I can ask more. Another question from Caroline Rose. Did you identify any emphasis on lab testing more batches of seized Captagon tablets? Going on, there is a concern about some of the new chemical inputs inside Captagon pills. And did you find any renewed interest from Jordanian authorities in testing more frequently? You've typed your answer as well, but I think the audience would like to hear it too.
Yeah, well, the answer that I have actually is anecdotal. It is not published in the literature, but I know that the forensic lab gets to analyze all or most or take random samples of the confiscated or the seized batches. Especially with the evolving and the soaring of the NPSs worldwide, the new psychoactive substances like synthetic cannabinoids and placa, the synthetic cathinones, which changes ingredients every day, constantly. So the forensic lab needs to be updated regarding the ingredients of the tablets available, even in the illicit market, of course, including Captagon. And this is how we knew that the available Captagon is not really the 60s Captagon or phenethylline. It's not phenethylline, it's anything else, everything else.
Thank you. Yes, we have another question. It's broad, sort of what are the implications of the study for stakeholders, Jordanian students? I think the question is really directed for young adults, Jordanian students, what do you feel sort of the message of this of the study you've been doing is? And this, I think, reflects some of the comments we're getting in the chat about raising awareness. So if you would like to say more on that topic, on what you think this study can contribute to these particular students and young adult populations in Jordan.
Well, coming from the academia, I would say that well, this study and other studies has a very important implication on, as you said, raising awareness and educating students about the short and long term, the positive and the negative. Well, the SOT, when I say positive, it's the short term, the SOT, short term effects of any substance that they hear in the news. Since I am I work in the School of Pharmacy and I teach future pharmacists, I feel obliged that I raise their awareness about the shape of tablets, the availability of the tablets in the illicit market, what to do if they encounter, a case, where to go, where to seek help, that kind of thing. And I would leave the other part of the answer to Chrissy, because she also she dealt in her part of the research with the other stakeholders.
Yeah, I think just to add, I mean, I think the question specifically asked about young people. What are the sort of, what's the message for young people? And I think for any user of illegal drugs is that you don't really know what's in it, you know. So I think that's, you know, that's a real issue. And these analyses show that there's a lot of different things in different pills with different pictures on, you know. So you're taking things and you don't actually know what is in it. But that is a universal problem with a drug taking anyway. Just to add to that as well, when I teach my students, my students in the UK, and I teach peace and conflict studies, and we often have sessions where we talk about the relationship between conflict and organized crime and how that takes very different forms and so on. But I often say to them, you know, because it's a worldwide issue, we see it in South America and so on as well. You know, I said to them, well, you know, when you are taking drugs socially or at a party or whatever, and we know that students do that worldwide, you know, just think as a politics and a peace and conflict studies student, you know, think about where does that come from, and what are the, you know, what are its connections with bloodshed, you know, and are effectively supporting and contributing to that economy by consuming and buying these drugs. Whether, you know, I don't think for one second that it's putting them off, you know, or changing their behavior on a Saturday night, but I feel that it's my duty to say that.
Yes, absolutely. And so I realize that time is running out, but I'm just going to ask the question, the where next. What are your next studies? Do you have how would you like to follow up? Do you have ideas of how you'd like to work together in future on this issue? Or students of yours, on the workshop day, there were some wonderful students who were following up with you on this amazing study. So where, what would you like to do next? The direction of your research and outreach and awareness raising.
I can start on that, and maybe Mayada can add. We've just, Mayada and I, with another colleague at Brooks as well, who works a lot on migration studies. We've actually just received funding to do a sort of a sort of seed funding to explore the possibility of a larger study looking at the connection between Captagon and migrant populations and refugees in Jordan. And of course, the idea is certainly not to contribute to any sort of securitization agenda where migrants or refugees are seen as a security threat. But there is some anecdotal evidence that there are links between Captagon and refugees. So we're interested in sort of seeing in the consumption patterns amongst refugee populations, the access to treatment that they have, the support that they need, and how they get that once they are in Jordan. And then also to look at how authorities respond to these linkages and to what extent these linkages are real, and so on. So that's a sort of a larger future project that we are working on now. Mayada, I don't know if you want to add.
Yes, so nothing to add actually, Chrissy. Hopefully that this grant will get through. I would also, if I get the opportunity, I would also like to pursue and study the link between the different types of tablets and the effects, the effects of different ingredients on users. This is something that I would think is really interesting, sometime in the future.
Yeah, thank you, and congratulations on the new funding. And it would be interesting to maybe invite you back in future to update us. So yes, really, our time is drawing to a close, and I would just like to thank very much Dr. Chrissy Steenkamp, who I realize is now reader in and Professor Mayada Wazefi for this really illuminating and thought-provoking webinar today, and for agreeing to share your results with CBRL and our audience, and to thank everybody who has attended today. Both Professor Mayada and Dr. Chrissy have said they would welcome if anyone would like to write to them, or follow up with them. They would be happy to answer more questions. And I hope to see you in Jordan again, both together. It was a very wonderful day that when you and your students and your researchers came to give the presentation on your results. So thank you very much. And yes, and for those of you attending, please do, if you're not already, sign up to CBRL's mailing list. We do all sorts of things, and we look forward to seeing you at another time. Thank you very much, and final thank you to Yasmin, who's behind the CBRL online, who's been taking care of us and making sure that everybody and making sure, yes, sign up to our newsletter, and making sure that everybody was informed and had links, and overseeing the social media as well as the technicalities today. So thank you, Yasmin, and I wish you all a pleasant rest of evening. So good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.